What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's review we're going to be taking a look at the Transformers Earthrise Generation Selects Decepticon Greasepit, a character and a figure that I quite honestly never would have expected Hasbro to have done, and when this figure was leaked / revealed I was really surprised. I have got to say though that this figure does actually look quite good in hand and isn't just a simple repaint of Ironworks. This figure does have some new additional elements, so without further ado let's take a look at Greasepit in his skyscraper / battle station mode. I've always been quite unsure as to what alt form this is supposed to replicate. It to me looks more like a skyscraper or perhaps some type of Cybertronian construction vehicle. I've always thought of this mode to have perhaps been a battle station mode for the Decepticons / the Autobots to actually utilise, depending on what colour variation of this figure you get. But taking a look at some of the stark differences between this figure and the previously released Ironworks, we do in fact get some additional components such as this section here, and it does actually have a really nice looking sticker. Now that is actually one of my major gripes with this figure, is the fact that Hasbro have resorted to going with sticker decals rather than printed decals like they have previously done with some of Earthrise and Siege, and I absolutely hate stickers as they tend to become loose and they begin to start fraying off at the edges and they're just super easy to rip. They become dirty and grubby looking. I just absolutely hate stickers. Upon opening this figure out of the packaging, the sticker on this was already beginning to start to peel. You may be able to see that on the corner I did actually have to press it down really hard, and I have had to do that quite a few times with this piece. And the other areas of which have stickers are these sections here. Once again, I definitely think this could have been replicated with paint, as this is a very similar style to that of the Siege animation version of Optimus Prime that we got, and that figure was completely painted and utilised printed on decals, so it's really unfortunate that they didn't carry that same technology over to here for Greasepit, perhaps because Greasepit is a rather obscure character and they don't expect many people to purchase him. That may be why they just decided to use stickers than rather spend the extra money and actually use printed on labels. But setting those off to the side, I actually do really like the artwork on the sticker with the racing car. I think that looks really nice, and you've got the Super Gasoline Z1. They also have included some gas pumps with this figure as well. He does have an alt form that does become almost as if though it's a gas station, so I will show you that, but that's quite a nice added feature as well. The rest of the components are a direct carryover from that of Ironworks, so let's bring him out for a comparison. You can see the stark difference here in colour, and once again, much like I was saying in my Airwave review, I've always thought of this version of Ironworks to be a Decepticon, and comparing it to the Decepticon version, which is of course Greasepit, I think that the colours are completely wrong. I imagine that they are accurate to the source material, but this here looks a lot more vibrant and definitely a lot more friendly and appealing than this. This to me more looks like a Decepticon than an Autobot, and this is actually the Autobot version, and this one is the Decepticon version, so it is rather obscure, their choice of colour variation, but you can just see here the stark difference in terms of the plastic and the paint. These sections are more or less exactly the same. They are a slightly lighter shade of grey, but you can see that this one is completely blue, whereas this one was more black. The scoop is now yellow, where this one was more of a darker colour, and quite honestly, I do actually prefer the colours, the more darker tones that we get here with Ironworks than that of Greasepit. I just think that this figure here comes across as almost like a play school toy and not a collector's item, so for me it's definitely not the best looking colour scheme, but I have got to appreciate some of the nice details. So just setting him off to the side, you can see some of the nice mechanical detailing that we get here, as well as some of the sculpt work at the top. I do actually think that this scoop section too is also detailed really nicely, and of course is articulated. I absolutely hate how that when you pick this up, this section flops down. That was also a critique I had on the other modulator from the second wave of Earthrise, that being Airwave, is that Hasbro never really figure out how to keep all the pieces stable with these modulators. You can see that this just tends to flop down, which is rather unfortunate as it doesn't make for a very stable looking alt form. I imagine that these sections here are supposed to act as turrets or some form of weaponry. They can rotate as well, so that's quite cool, and I think that kids and collectors alike are going to have a blast with these, with combining them with other modulators, as well as recreating and coming up with your own ideas of some battle scenes. But just transforming this now into its gas station mode, I believe it is, or perhaps its highway mode. Once again, I'm not really familiar with where the Hasbro were going with their alt forms for this character, but just detaching him into his individual components. Now that we have Greasepit in all of his individual components, we'll begin transforming him up. So you're going to want to take these sections here and just extend these pieces out. Repeat the same process here for the opposite side. They do soft tab into place. You will hear a click. You can hear that there is a bit of friction there. You're going to want to leave them in a position that looks along the lines of this, and then just leave this one out. Come to this piece now, and you're going to want to peg this port into there, ensuring that that's all up, and then take this one as well and peg this into place also. With that now done, we can take the arm, fold out this tab, and then just port this in. And then this will act almost as if though it's a tripod, so a third leg for this particular alt form. Then we'll take this section and we'll snap this into place. Take this one, snap that into place. If you haven't done so already, fold this up. So for the alternate form, it was like this. You're then going to want to just fold it up and snap that in. And then peg all that together. Come to this section, port the gas pumps into the back of this sign, and then the sign will port into the peg here. So just snap that into place. And then with this gun, what they ask you to do is actually port it into the side. However, you can see here that on my copy, this tends to flop down, or it sits up at an angle where it looks rather unnatural, as if though it's going up a hill. So what I like to do is take this and just prop that under there and levitate it ever so slightly so that this almost has a support structure underneath it. And for me, that keeps it aligned and level. And here we have Greasepit transformed up into, once again, another one of his more obscure alternate forms. Now for me, this looks perhaps like a Cybertronian gas station. I'm not entirely sure whether or not the Transformers, the Autobots or the Decepticons would really need to refuel their tanks as they run on Energon. But you could have them rolling up this section and then stopping off at the gas pumps. And these here act almost as if though they are discharges. So perhaps some type of firepower or smoke or toxins can shoot out these, which is quite cool. And you can indeed put blast effects in there. So just giving you a quick look at how this looks. Once again, one of the more obscure alternate forms. I just think that Hasbro were looking at something they could give us that was slightly different with this one, as I don't believe the instruction manual for Ironworks had this mode incorporated into them. But once again, definitely not my favourite alt form, but transforming him up into what is my favourite alternate form for him, that being his actual gas station mode in my opinion. I think that this next mode I'm going to show you looks a lot better than any of the previous modes that I've shown. So you just want to remove all of this, snap those all in, snap all that into place, bring these sections together, and then what we'll do is we'll come to this section, so take this yellow piece and just port that into place. Now what we'll do is we'll take this, and you can see these two ports here and here that are going to tab into these legs, so at the kneecaps of where the legs are, that's going to port in there. And then we can take this and port this into there. Now, this huge port here will insert into this tab, and the small circular section to the gun will peg into this. So you're just going to want to align all of that up and snap that all into place. Now, what I like to do is actually take this section now and port this into place, because we're actually going to take this and snap that in. And if you snap this in, it could be rather difficult to actually get this port in there. So once that's done, we can just bring that in and snap that all nice and securely into place. With that now done, we can take this section, port that into the side. We can take this, put that in there, and then finally this goes there. Just collapse that down. And here you have Greasepit in what I like to believe is his official gas station mode. And I really do like the look of this. You can see that I think that the gas pump is in a nice placement. I do like the overall symmetry to it, the way that these sections here are symmetrical. There's no ups and downs or bumpy sections like there was with the previous alt forms. This does look like a really coherent alt form, and it's the most stable and the most solidified out of them all as well. So I will definitely, if I were to keep Greasepit or Ironworks in an alt form, would choose this one. You can see once again, I think that this is in the correct placement. It's almost as if though it's advertisement for the drivers to drive up and use the gas station. And I do like how the details of this look here sitting along the side. So just giving you a quick 360 look at this as well. Definitely a really nice looking alternate mode. And here for a comparison, here we have Greasepit compared next to his mold-mate Ironworks, and you can see once again they are exactly the same figures. However, this time the placement of this section is very different than that of Ironworks, and I actually do think it creates for a vastly different look. It really does give a different feel to the overall figure, and of course you can connect these. So we can have this being the repair station, and then they lead up to the gas station as they're on their way out. So that's quite cool. And if you've got multiples of these or your battle masters, you can begin to peg those in, such as Sound Barrier or Slitherfang. So that's quite cool. Now, transforming Greasepit up into arguably his best mode, that being his robot mode, is actually really quite straightforward. So first of all, remove the gas pumps, and then just remove this section and remove this, set this off to the side. Detach this, set this off to the side also. Come here snap the head up and rotate the head sculpt around. The head sculpt is exactly the same as that of Ironworks. I would have perhaps liked it if they could have given us a different head sculpt, much like they did with the Exhaust Generation Selects figure, which I'll be taking a look at very shortly. But nonetheless, I think that the overall colour scheme makes this figure look definitely vastly different than that of Ironworks. And then we just remove this and remove this section, remove this piece, fold out the thigh sections on both sides, fold all that out. Now we'll come to this section, just detach that, fold this out, take this now and port the legs into place. We can then take the torso. You can see the slots and ports that will correspond with one another, so just snap those in. Take the back shield, snap that in, take this section and snap this into place, just lifting up that joint, just snap that in. Rotate this around, and then you're going to want to take the gas pumps and peg those in. And now these act as if they are almost a club weapon for Greasepit to use, which I think looks quite cool. And it really does give them a completely different purpose and function within robot mode. And then finally we'll take this and complete all of the major limbs. Just snap that in. And then with this section, you just port this into the side of the shoulder. And then with these, it's really up to your own personal interpretation. I quite like to port that into the shoulder. And then with this, quite like to put that in as if though he's using an under the arm Gatling gun. I think that looks quite cool. But here we have Greasepit fully transformed up into his robot mode, and I actually, once again, similarly to that of Ironworks, really do quite like the look of how this figure looks in his robot mode. I've always been a fan of the Ironworks mould in his robot form, and here for Greasepit, despite me perhaps not favouring the colour scheme over Ironworks, I still think that the robot mode looks really nice, and I do like the placement of some of the new pieces. Taking a look at Greasepit's head sculpt, you can see that for the main helmet section, it is just a grey plastic, which is unfortunate, and as I stated whilst transforming the figure, I would have loved it if they could have given him a completely different head sculpt or just altered the head sculpt in some way, but nonetheless we are left with the same head sculpt. I do love the reflective purple metallic paint that they've used there for the mouth guard, and the eyes are picked out in a really nice light blue. I do quite like the paint apps on this figure as well. All the paint apps do appear to have come out quite clean. So you can see here you've got the yellow section for this scoop and the purple detailing for the vents, the Decepticon insignia. I do believe that this section here is actually painted, or if not, it is made out of a really glossy blue. You can see that definitely does look metallic. So if that is a plastic, Hasbro definitely did a great job in mixing that plastic. And you can see the placement of this signage section in robot mode. And then you've got the gas pumps for Greasepit to use in order to club the Autobots with. And you can see some nice sculpted in detailing here for the thighs. And then the shins are quite nicely detailed. Quite bland when we get to these panels on the legs and on the back. But as a whole, really quite a nice looking figure. Articulation, the head is on a ball joint, so it looks left to right, up, down. Can tilt side to side ever so slightly. Full 360 rotation here, as well as a hinge out to the sides. A full 360 rotation here, as well as a double jointed elbow here for this arm due to transformation, whereas this one unfortunately is just a single hinge. And you do also have the option of actually folding up the shoulder pad on this arm as well. However, I quite like to leave it in this configuration. We do get a waist rotation, however it's very limited due to the way it's placed and due to the transformation, so we only get that type of movement, but the legs can ratchet out softly that far, ratchet backwards that far. They can also hinge out to the side, so we do get a full 360 rotation there for the thigh. And due to the transformation, the legs can actually bend to a considerable degree as well, which is really nice. And of course, as per tradition with Earthrise and Siege, we do get some killer ankle rocker joints. So as a whole, for articulation and for colour scheme and overall detail, I think that Greasepit here looks really nice. For a robot mode comparison, comparing both Greasepit and Ironworks to one another, you can see the vast difference in their colour schemes. Now, the majority of this figure is just a direct reuse of the Ironworks mould, with the exception of this section as well as the section on the arm. The rest of it is just a complete reuse, so unfortunately we don't get any brand new remoulded pieces actually integrated into the figure like we did with Hubcap and we did with Exhaust. They both came with new integrated head sculpts. All of these are just additional components, and quite honestly I would have much rather them perhaps have scrapped this section and given us a brand new head sculpt, although I do believe that this was accurate to the original toy that we got, so I guess it was essential for them to include this, but I really would have loved a new head sculpt just to make this figure look slightly more different than that of Ironworks. But you can see, comparing the two, very different in terms of their colour schemes. I still stick with what I said earlier on in saying that this looks more like an Autobot and this one looks like a Decepticon, so if they just switched over the insignias, I think that would probably sit slightly better with me. And I do actually quite like the more realistic wash that Ironworks has on him rather than the more plasticky look that Greasepit has here. So if I had to choose between the two, I still would go with Ironworks. However, that's not to say that Greasepit isn't a nice repaint. He definitely is, and it is nice to get another modulator and one that is the same as Ironworks, as you can begin to combine them and begin to create your own city. But for me as a collector, I would have much rather another character taken this particular character's spot for the Generation Selects line. So that was my review for the newly released Transformers Earthrise Generation Selects Deluxe Class Decepticon Greasepit. As you could probably guess throughout this review, I definitely have mixed feelings about this figure. I'm a massive fan of the figure's mould, I really did enjoy Ironworks, and to get that figure again in a different colour scheme just gives me an excuse to buy more of that mould and expand our modular bases. But on a personal level, the overall colour scheme and the character just in general doesn't appeal to me, as he is one of the more obscure characters, and as I did say, I would have much rather of them given this particular spot to another character that was perhaps more well known. But then again, I'm not really sure what other character they could have used in order to actually reuse this mould. I do think that the reuse of the mould is warranted, and I think that it does suit the character of Greasepit really nicely from the information I could gather on him. But there are just some major turn-offs for me with this figure, such as some of the really awkwardly and rather bizarre alternate form choices that Hasbro have chosen for this figure. There was one, I believe it was the second transformation that I did, that I just have no idea what they were thinking of. It definitely looks as if though they were just trying to figure out a different alt form to give this figure so that the instruction manual looked slightly different to that of Ironworks. And another thing that also really bugs me is the use of sticker decals. I absolutely hate them, as I just know over time they're going to become yucky, they're going to start to peel, as they already are in my case, so I really would have had rather skipped the sticker detail completely or had used printed on decals as they have done with some of the other figures. So for me, do I regret purchasing this figure? No, but this really isn't one that I highly recommend, as I do believe that it's probably only going to appeal to a very niche portion of the collector market. So with all that being said, that just about wraps up my review for Greasepit. Did you enjoy the review? If you did, please do let me know down in the comment section below. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on whether or not you're going to be adding this figure to your collection, and whether or not you do agree with my thoughts on this release, and whether or not you think that this select spot should have gone to another character. I thank you all for watching this review, and until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.